A boy uses his teleportation ability to do things that will surprise you. So without further delay, let's do our today's explanation. David Rice is a teenager living a normal life in a small town. He talks to his classmate Millie, who likes him. David gives Millie a snow globe, which Millie accepts wholeheartedly. Another classmate, Mark, intervened and took the gift, making fun of David. Then their classmates threw a snow globe into the frozen lake, and David tried to get it. Millie tried to dissuade him, but David continued. David reached for the snow globe, but the ice gave way and he fell lower. Millie runs to help, but David gets stuck. The current dragged David further, and he could no longer return to the water. Suddenly, he finds himself in the middle of a public library. David is completely disoriented, completely confused and shocked, but tries to get out of the library without arousing suspicion. David came home and his father, William, noticed that he was late. David lives alone with his father because his mother abandoned him when he was a child. William asked where David was, but he didn't answer. William got angry and chased David to his room. David locked his room, but William tried to force himself to enter. Once William breaks in, David disappears and reappears in the library. Realizing that his newfound powers could be the key to improving his life, he came home and took some of the money he had saved. He decided to move to a big city to start David's new life, and then tried to learn more about his powers by training in the park to see if he could better control his power. He flips through a travel magazine, sees various tourist attractions around the world, and tries to teleport to those places. He saw the Empire State Building and remembered being with his mother Mary. The things in his room suddenly shattered, and he teleported to the Empire State Building. David then realizes that he can only teleport to places where he has been without money, and David decides to use his powers to steal money from the bank. He went to the bank and asked to use the restroom, and as he walked he caught a glimpse of the inside of the bank vault. That night, David teleported to the vault and took as much money as he could. He made several trips, filling his bag every time he returned. The next day, an investigation into the bank robbery began. Roland Cox appears and informs the bank manager that he works for the government. He then requested all CCTV footage and the names of everyone who had entered the bank in the last month. Roland noted that the bank vault was never opened, and authorities do not know how the robbery was carried out. Roland seems to know who can teleport, and suggests that the theft may have been committed many years ago. While David now lives in a penthouse in downtown New York, David lives in abundance. He has everything he needs, and he does whatever he wants. His apartment is filled with photos around the world, and he even has a secret room with different countries' currencies, which David then teleports to a London pub and discovers a beautiful woman. He unceremoniously teleports to her and another man. Griffin sees him teleport. He spent the night with a girl, and the next day he went to Fiji to ride big waves. He then traveled to Egypt where he dined on the Sphinx in the tropical jungle, when the man teleported and tried to escape. He teleports into the desert but has a cable tied to him, preventing him from leaving. He got stuck in a tree, tangled in wires. Roland appeared and walked ahead of him. The teleporter asked Roland why he did this to him, and Roland told him that anyone who could teleport was abominable and should be eliminated. He then stabbed the man, killing him. Roland then received a call about a robbery that had taken place a few years earlier, and David returned to his New York apartment to find Roland there. Roland informs David that he is investigating a bank robbery, that he is not from the police department. David told Roland to leave, but instead, Roland took a baton and electrocuted David. David tried to teleport, but barely walked a few meters. Roland ran up, electrocuted David again, and threw him off the windowsill. Roland then fired at the cable and hit David with the club. Roland pressed his club to the floor, holding David in place, so he couldn't teleport too far. Desperate to escape, David teleports to a hidden room in the wall and manages to cut the cable. David disappeared with several bags of money and reappeared in his father's old room. William heard David's arrival and rushed to him. William begged David to stay, telling David that he wasn't sure if he was losing his mind because of his son's disappearance. David then told William that he was not crazy, but quickly disappeared. The next day, David looks for Millie and finds that she works at a local bar. He then meets Mark, his former bully on campus, and they get into an argument. David then eventually teleports Mark to the bank vault and leaves him there. David returns to Millie and they catch up to them. David tells Millie that he works in banking now and asks Millie how she is doing in the city. Millie said she still dreamed of traveling the world, and David invited her to join him on a trip to Rome. Millie was overjoyed to hear the news and told David that she would like to go with him. A few hours later, David and Millie were in Rome, on their way to the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Roland pretends to work for the CIA in order to find Mark at the police station. He asks him what happened at the bank, and Roland finds out about Millie and learns that she has just arrived in Rome. David and Millie are in the apartment talking about their lives and how they are going to get through the last few days. Later, David and Millie then became romantic and shared an intimate moment, kissing passionately. Later that day, David sneaks Millie into the Colosseum, and they explore the area while avoiding the guards. David then separated from Millie, opened the locked door, and ended up hitting Griffin. Griffin revealed that he was another guy who could teleport, calling himself and others like him jumpers. Griffin talks about David's extravagant and carefree lifestyle and informs him that a group of people called the Paladins are determined to kill all jumpers. As he explained, a couple of Paladins appeared. The Paladins came up and drew their clubs, and a fight ensued. David tried to escape but was caught by one of the live wires. His teleportation ability is disabled again. Griffin then proceeded to fight the two Paladins, quickly defeating them. He incapacitates both pursuers and tells David that he has been killing Paladins for a long time. He then teleports to his secret lair. David sees the remnants of Griffin's jump, called the Jump Scar, and follows him. Griffin warns him to leave, and David returns to Millie, who then takes Millie and leads her out of the Colosseum. But Millie demands an explanation for what happened. Before David could begin to explain, the police arrived and arrested David for breaking into the Colosseum. At the police station, David was interrogated, but he insisted that he was just a tourist who broke the rules and apologized. The police then left David and told him to wait for the magistrate at the US Embassy. While David was waiting, a woman entered, whom David recognized as his mother Mary. Mary told David that he only had 30 seconds, and then the other Paladins came over and handed him the key to unlock the handcuffs. Mary hurried back and David chased after her but lost her. David then meets Millie, and the two of them head to the airport. At the airport, David tells Millie that they need to break up. Millie was disappointed to hear the news, but continued to fly alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house and introduces himself as an IRS officer. Roland asked David, but William was unwelcome and uncooperative. William told Roland that he had not seen David for 8 years. He also mentioned how Maria left him and David when David was 5 years old. William asks Roland to leave, come to Griffin's hideout, and sees Griffin's walls covered in photos and information about Paladins from all over the world. David asked Griffin to explain why the Paladins killed the Jumper, and Griffin explained that the war had been going on since the Dark Ages. According to Griffin, Paladins are religious fanatics who believe that the power of teleportation should belong only to God. He then told David that Paladin would kill anyone without hesitation, just to face David. Realizing that his father and Millie might be in trouble, David teleports to William and finds him unconscious on the floor. He took them to the hospital, where medical workers rush to help William. David returns to Griffin's hideout to get more information on Roland, as he intends to kill him. Griffin said it was useless because he had been following Roland for more than 10 years. Every time they met, Griffin had more and more scars. David offered to help capture Roland, but Griffin refused him. Griffin then teleports to China, but David follows him, still trying to convince Griffin to let him help. When David tells Griffin he knows where Roland might be next, Griffin finally agrees. As far as Millie is concerned, they decide to separate. David will pick up Millie, and Griffin will go back to the hideout to arm himself. David arrives at Millie's apartment. Millie is surprised to see David again and tells him she doesn't want to mess with him anymore. Millie tells David to leave, but David hears Roland and a few others coming. With no other choice, David must tell Millie the truth by introducing himself as a jumper. Millie was surprised to see David's power and went mad when she ran away. Knowing they were in danger, David grabbed her and teleported both of them to the terrifying Roland Griffin. The other Paladins entered Millie's apartment and saw it empty, but Roland found a jump scar. They took out a device, placed it under the jump scar, and a portal began to form. They try to reopen the jump scar, so they can see David meet Griffin, but Griffin is angry to see Millie with them. Griffin tells David about the Paladin machine and says that bringing Millie to the hideout will lead the Paladins directly to them. David and Griffin examine the jumping scar and find it's getting bigger. Moments later, Roland appears as David and Griffin are hiding. But while David is hiding, he sees a picture of Mary hanging on Griffin's wall among the known paladins. David was then marked and pinned to the wall by a live cable. Griffin enters with a flamethrower. Griffin and Roland then engage Griffin, using his teleportation abilities to gain the upper hand. Roland is also good at fighting with paladin technology. Griffin knocks Roland out of hiding and teleports them away, but when returning, a running bus is aimed directly at Roland. Roland didn't have time to react, but managed to avoid the approaching people. But Millie found David stuck in the wall and tried to free him, but Roland seemed ready to kill her. Millie was stunned, but Griffin reappeared with a flamethrower, shooting Roland back at the jump scare. Griffin jumped up behind him. Roland and Griffin reappear in Millie's apartment, and the fight continues. Back at the hideout, Millie managed to free David, but told him she wanted to go home. She didn't want to be involved in anything that was going on. She just wanted to get back to a normal life. David had no choice, he agreed. As he prepares to bring back Millie, Griffin successfully reappears, opening the operation with the paladin jump scars. But with the jump scar still there, the paladin still managed to grab Millie via the cable and bring her back to the apartment. David tries to save Millie, but Griffin prepares a bomb. David is confused, but Griffin tells him that this is his chance to end the paladins once and for all. He intends to teleport to the apartment with the bomb. David protested and teleported away with the bomb. Griffin chases him, and they end up fighting by teleporting through many different locations. They teleport to Egypt, San Francisco, and New York. While fighting for the bomb's remote detonator, they end up in a war-torn country where Griffin finally gets his detonator. But Griffin didn't see the tower falling on them from above. David teleported Griffin into the tower, and a large amount of electricity grabbed Griffin and pinned him to the ground. Griffin tries to dissuade David from going back to the apartment, saying he has no chance against the 5 paladins, but David is determined to save Millie. David returns to the apartment and reaches Millie, but is immediately stabbed by 5 cables holding the paladin to the apartment. David struggled, still focused on teleporting. This caused the entire apartment to shake violently, connected with a wire to David and the apartment. Every time David tries to teleport, the apartment also leaves with him. He grunted and screamed, and the walls of the apartment shook and cracked. Finally, he made a final push, teleporting the entire apartment back to the lake, where he discovered his powers. Most of the paladins were incapacitated, some drowned, and David teleported the apartment back to the library. David regained consciousness and saw that Roland was still alive. David then took Roland and dumped him somewhere in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Time passed and David found his mother. Mary's daughter opened the door, and David and Mary finally spoke. Mary explains that she is also a paladin. When David first teleported at the age of 5, Mary made the difficult decision to leave him in order to protect him from other paladins. Now that they are reunited, David asks what will happen. Mary then replied that she would give him a head start, and David returned to Millie to wait for him. They held hands, smiled at each other, and walked away.